How's it going, everybody? And welcome to another video on the intermediate React, where the goal of this course is how we can write production ready apps in React. A course taught by Brian Holt. Shout out to Brian Holt, a software engineer that has previously worked at Reddit, Netflix, Microsoft, and also Snowflake. And currently he's a VP of product at SQLite Cloud. So the goal of this is by looking at tools and techniques that allow us to write this particular production ready applications, we can now do that, solve the client problems. So the techniques and tools here we got is the code splitting, server-side rendering, testing, and transitions. Okay, techniques and tools like Tailwind, Typescript, and Redux. So far we have looked at hooks in depth, Tailwind's advanced React performance, part of these techniques that I mentioned before, such as sorry, server-side rendering, code splitting, low priority rendering, which is this notion in React that there are things that React prioritized in terms of rendering, and those that are not. So when something happens, I will drop it in, or I will drop in the floor. TypeScript, we're gonna see a migration from GSX to TSX. All right, especially what are the hard parts and the pain points involved. Then we're gonna look at Redux and finally testing. So today we're gonna focus our attention is on TypeScript, okay? So we can then let it on move on to Redux and testing, and make a quick recap of all of these scores or all of these modules. So hooks in depth. Here we look at the specific business use case that Facebook create for their to solve their problems. So for example, we have useref. Again, all of these are advanced hooks or hooks in depth. So useref. So we have use reducers, use callback, use memo, as well as use layout and use ID. And then we also look at tailwinds. What is all about with tailwinds, and what is the difference between Bootstrap and Material Design, where those are the UI design systems, where now tailwinds tell you how to write CSS classes. So by looking at the anatomy, which is the compiler, the transpiler in CSS, post CSS, as well as the auto prefixer, we also look at how we can start to write out our application with tailwinds, which is adding this little tiny class in your components that then the compiler, Tailwind compiler, take it and generate this minified version of your CSS code. The reason behind that is that it's way much more easy to maintain HTML elements than large CSS code bases, according to their website, and also in my experience as well. So after we look at that, okay, and then how can we use it? How can we extend Tailwinds using plugins? How can we also look at the anatomy of the code base with components and utilities? How we can define layout, which is one of the great things of using a Tailwinds, and also it allows you to define its breakpoints. Then we look now at these advanced techniques, okay, which is something that is hugely in demand for companies whether it's on e-commerce or field management service, you name it, okay? But the idea there is you got code splitting and you also have server-side rendering. So the first focus is how can we load the bare minimum code and make that load or that initial load faster as much as possible, so we can teach our app how to set up in sorry the idea here is to minimize the initial load by only fetching the necessary amount of code that teach our app how to set up things so we can show something to the users while in the background load everything. So this is something that we can do with React that allow you to use this particular function called lazy. And lazy let you to define all of these components that you can later on load it. Okay? You might wonder how React knows which components needs to load later and where all of this is stored. So this is something that service worker enters the chat, because if you're not familiar with this, this is just a browser feature that sits between your app and the app request and your API, that by looking at a manifest that is generated for model bundlers, or even yourself, you can do that. Model bundlers like V, Webpack, or Parcel, you can now identify and tell to the service worker, this is the resource I would like you to catch or to store. This is the resource I would like you to fetch once the user asking for, among other configurations. So again, because this is not a course from service worker, there's also other courses out there that you can take a look at that, where you can, for example, from Maximiliano and Kyle Simpson as well. So with that, the idea here is that once you know what this code splitting code works, because you define is your initial budget, perhaps you want to set a threshold and stay under, or you want to set up a performance or you wanna reach a performance hit. Both of things, it is recommended that you set up a code budget for that. So, because for example, if you are developing application for your copter, okay, you can safely assume that most of the time those users will have a decent amount of connection. However, if you are building an application for farmers that want to keep track of how much watering they are spreading to the crops, something out there in the boonies, or you might want to provide field service management in remote areas. So for example, in oils and wells, hauling services and that kind of thing. Well, now here your bandwidth budget is very sensitive, especially in those areas in poor call coverage or 2G. Now, with that, then we look at the server-side rendering. The server-side rendering, after all, is because the way how we build now applications. Back in the old days, we do something called the round trip. So anytime a user clicks something, You have to wait for that request fly away, server responds to that, generate the HTML, serve that content, and then now you are able to see that. So on the industry, uh, so top companies or big companies decide to have a more attitude to solve this slowness process. So to solve this problem here with the thing that is slow. So how do they do that? So previously we have an architecture called MVC, okay, but now they say, well, let now load the necessary, or let now load our application in the client side, okay, as well as the navigation and the routing in the client side, because now most of these end devices can actually run this, can execute this JavaScript code, and the whole purpose of that is to increase the user experience, so you can have is so you have better user experience, user retention, and ultimately user conversion. So with this business focus, this is now the solution that came here. So we have application that rendering on the client, okay, or client side rendering, an application that render on the server. So because of it, remember that the end goal of this is to make the applications feel faster, okay? So now we have is the client code and the server code. So when the user now is navigating in the client, in the browser, okay? So for example, the user wants to look some of their a shirt for a dog or cat, okay? So he went through a particular e-commerce, he looked at the search bar, type anything that he wants, or type shirts, doggy shirts, okay? Wait for the results to load, which most of the time are fast. He then look and search through that, click on one product, it show the product detail. He look at the reviews, that kind of thing. Then he said, okay, add to the cart. And then add to the cart, yeah, he check out everything here is there. Okay, so they're now going to add the billing address and ultimately make the payment. Okay, so from user retention to user conversion here, the client is navigating through your app. Okay, client side routing or client side navigation here. But what happens if the user, for example, look at the product, but he realized, hey, I don't have the money right now, but I would like to keep it, this product. So let's say he stored a URL, okay? So once he stored that URL, 2 weeks later, now he copy and paste that, and now the user is not navigating in our app, is now requesting something in the user, and this something to the server, and the server must render something, and that's where it comes the server side rendering. So to cover these two scenarios, okay, in the context of React, we have is the client code that we need to load, which is aka high rotation, and then we have is the server side code, which is when we're going to stream that data as they are available. So React offers these two little convenience, these little convenience functions where in previous versions, code splitting and server-side rendering didn't work well together, but now they do. Thanks. So server-side rendering and client-side rendering, you need to generate is those GSX file or TSX file, okay? Then you let to your model bundler, hey, let's going to now build this two files, okay? Where we're going to now store our app and let now React to generate is the necessary code in JavaScript for us, okay? And ultimately we need to build is the server to say, hey, when the user requests something here that is not an asset, in this basic example we did is we let React to handle all of our routes for us, which is whatever route you listen to, I would like you to render the code as string as soon as they are available and send it to the client. So because this process is something that is slow, and here I can tell that this is it, like this, okay? So because this process is, for Google, is slow, because web crawlers are waiting that your content is available quickly, so they don't work for that. The thing here is, well, now that I know that, how you can is fix that if FCO is a problem. So if FCO is a problem, then you will need to generate is the entire, or you need to render the entire HTML before sending it. Okay, so you're not going to send that as chunks of data. When this is useful, so for example for landing pages, okay, so for example for home pages, in the case of your e-commerce or any of your web app that needs to be ranked, that, all right? So for example, product details that you need to actually rank that for that. Again, remember that rendering every page will defeat the purpose of that. But in any case, then after that, the server-side rendering, then we look at this low priority rendering, which is this notion, as I mentioned before, of high priority rendering and low priority rendering. The TLDR is that you're gonna let React, when you're going to slow something that is that's heavy, and when something wrong happens, I would like you to drop it. Okay, so we have this use defer value in use transition, where use transition is, hey, I have something heavy, too low, I would like you to prepare for it. And then use defer value is that we're going to load something heavier, so I would like you to prepare for it. And finally, we look now at Typescript. So Typescript here, again, as I mentioned before, this is a course that is focused on the how we're gonna migrate our GSX file to Typescript file, which is something that you might find common in a lot of code bases, especially old code bases. And the idea here, sorry. And the idea here is that look at the Brian Hall face and their pain points, recognize how you can identify in your life, okay? And then when you find them, well, okay, try to find a way of how he solved that so you can replicate that behavior. So first thing first, we start up here with Typescript, no big deal. We install the library, and then we run the initial configurations. We already copy and paste some configuration for ourselves like this. Pretty straightforward. Here is where we say, hey, what is the target output that we want to generate that? What is the JavaScript file that we want to generate? Is there any flavor of that we need to recognize? For example, GSS. What will be the model definition here that we're going to work with, as well as if this is a strict or not, especially if you are going to make this migration. You might want to set this to false, and then we look at how can we add that to our linter. So back in the old days, we have something called TSLint, and now we have is the ESLint. So they unify that in one stack. Thanks for us. So this lint, what it does is to help you to define the code style of your code, and will help you to fix some common problems now in Typescript. Because ESLint is for ECMAScript, with this Typescript we need to add that as a plugin. Okay, so we need is the plugin per se that has the recommended code style. Also the library that I need to load all of our Typescript files, as well as the logic here, which is the parser, where you say, hey, now I need you to identify our Typescript file or our GSX or TSX file, and allow me, and help me to fix some common gotchas here. And that's exactly what we did here with this ESLint, right? So for example, ESLint importer, hey, give us the ability to import Typescript files. The ESLint plugin itself, which is the ability to lint Typescript files. And here the logic here, because Typescript or ESLint doesn't understand Typescript code. All right. So we also generate is the format and the lint. This is more useful for CI/CD pipelines when you want to make everything work as expected, which is great, which is cool. Okay. And when now Mercury is retrograde and my Aquarius is aligned with Jupiter, it is fine then. So Typescript is ready and happy. Of course, I'm joking. This is how it's going to look like here. As you can see here, we got is a Typescript here. We must put always printer at the bottom. So this is a Typescript recommended guidelines code style. We also add the plugins here. We tell the parser, hey, I want you to now load this configuration. I want you to let the logic to, I want to let the ESLint to recognize is the logic here, which is the parser option here. We're gonna leave that everything as it is. Okay. And on the settings, so you can see here, this is the parser option. Yeah, we're also going to add is the parser, which is how we tell ESLint, hey, this is the logic of how you can work with Typescript files, and how you can recognize Typescript file. And this is the couple option here. Okay. This is something that is common in ESLint. Hey, what will be is the version that you want to recognize, as well as the source types and any other additional feature here. Again, remember that this is the linter. And then we also mentioned here what will be the environments. So I don't want you to complain about it. For example, if you see code from ESLint or for the browser or for the node, okay. And then the settings here, which is, hey, this is when you tell, hey, this is React, okay. And the parsers and the resolvers. Again, parser from TypeScript, okay, like in our case here, parser from TypeScript. Hey, I want you to now recognize this type of files, and the important resolvers I want you to recognize is those files when I'm going to import them, or in this case, when you want us to resolve it, when you want to fetch the type from it. So that's great, because with this initial setup, with the TypeScript compiler, and then with the ESLint, now we look at how can we make our migrations here from the GSS to TSX. Okay. First things first, you can start with your leaf React components, which means that any React or any component that doesn't hold too many reference models is a good candidate. Portal is another good candidate, which is something that we did. And then things starting to become interesting, because this is when now Brian Hall dropped some gems. And that is migrating TypeScript from 10th to 60% is misery. So the less you fight the compiler, the better off will be. Because now this is a dance here. Because the problem with that is you don't know if the TypeScript compiler is telling you, hey, this is if this is a TypeScript error, or is this being or is TypeScript being finicky about it. So in our case, we started to migrate is, for example, our API response. We define the types, and we changed the GSX to TSX, and then we started to evaluate that. Okay, how can we now let the TypeScript to properly inherit all of that? We also look at the DOM elements, all right, especially working with class components, how you need to be very defensive about how you're going to set up all of your code, and this is something that we're going to pass through. The more you do that, the better off we'll be. We also take a look at the context props and error boundary. In the case of the context, things becomes a little longer because now you need is to satisfy this particular signature that React gives to us by defining is the action and then the dispatcher, and pretty much that's it. We also here pass is a default value to our context. This is something a little bit of useful for testing. Okay, something that Brian Hall mentioned, but also you can pass null, and there's nothing wrong with that. But usually we pass is a default value. Then we look at how can we do that with error boundaries. Again, we are importing some type relevance to the. We are importing some React TypeScript. Okay. And then we look at how can we now is uh, migrate our functional components. There's a salty here when you want to use this React FC or not. The sole difference is that they enforce more strict uh, rules. Okay, it makes things more restrictive than the functional components CS template. It is up to you to decide to go with. So far we have talked about is the React, uh, yeah, the how can we start to migrate our Typescript file or GSX to TSX? Start with the leaf components, okay? For example, models, and then we look at how we can define and migrate is API endpoints or API response. Okay, so for example, detail pages, most of the times is like that, and that is well. This detail pages is where you're going to now perform, you're going to hit API endpoints. This doesn't guarantee that when the APIs change, it'll break your app, because TypeScript only cares about runtime errors in JavaScript, no API response. And for that, we have tools like TRPC that allow you to do that. There are also some other functions out there like C, which is SOP, which is this TypeScript schema first generator and validator. You have to be. Brian Hall mentioned that anytime they use some TypeScript generators, is usually they generate a lot of garbage. So they are writing their own TypeScript, which it tends to be much more easy and better. So it is up to you, right? And the other is the TypeScript validators, which might be quite useful. It might be quite useful. Okay. We also look at how can we define or how can we migrate from how can we migrate to DOM elements. How this is actually something that, because React is a wrapper around the DOM, so you're going to use those synthetic TypeScript models or types here as a way to actually make sense of that. We also look at the how can we now migrate from functional components, context, and arrow boundaries. I'm going to make a quick recap here again. So first, your models, portals, or leaf components. Then look at your API response, okay, or your API components, API response components, how they are handled, that logic, especially in large code bases. All of that will be centralized in services, okay. Then you look at how you're gonna handle is DOM events, okay, functional components, context, error boundaries, and now the capability of React, which is with React Query. And then typing with a form. So, this is where we are, my friend.
To breed list, that a .ts file as well. Before we do that, pop over to your API response types. We need one list, which is going to be a list of API response. And it takes in an animal, or gives you back an animal, which is of type animal, and breeds, which is going to be a list of strings. Let's do breed list, that a .ts file as well. Before we do that, pop over to your API response types.
Well, you're not gonna see what what I'm doing right now. I'm actually is on a different window looking at the course. I'm taking notes out of it.
Need one more type of response, export interface. We're going to call this a breed list API response. And it takes in an animal, or gives you back an animal, which is of type animal, and breeds, which is going to be a list of strings. Okay, pretty straightforward type right there. And then here in fetch breeds.ts, same thing here. I'm going to make this an async arrow function. So const okay, this is now an arrow function. Still mad about the props, but let's go fix that. Change that to use breedlist.ts. This is a custom hook. A little bit of stuff to type here. So use breedlist, export default function, use breedlist. Animal here is going to be an animal. You can pull that in there. Use query here with breeds, animal fetch list. That's all fine. That looks like it works just great. Okay, and then here we just need to like definitively type. Oh, this is what I need to show you. Right now, if you mouse over this, you can see that
You say string or error loading, but we don't want that.
it thinks that this array that we're returning is everything in here can either be a
Breed?
a breed list, or it can be a status, right? When in reality, we actually have a very specific kind of tuple type here, and we need to identify to Typescript is like, no, literally always the 0th element in this is going to be a breed list. The second element is always going to be a status. We cannot switch that. We cannot have more things than that. It's always exactly this. Does that make sense? Otherwise, it thinks it's just a mix of this, and it can be either one all the time, which is a valid assumption for Typescript to make. So you can just say as here to identify. It's like, no, we actually want to identify this as string.
This is string.
Blah. String array and what
and
do we
the
have
other
here?
is
Query status.
Query status. This is a way to do
now you can see
type
here,
notation.
we've refined that it always returns this particular shape of a return type. Does that make sense? Otherwise, anytime that you
Totally that makes sense. Totally that makes sense. Okay. In our model path, we solve such patterns, but I think this is in our custom hook. Use. Oh, come on. In our custom hook, use breed list. There you got it. Yep. Okay. Okay, here we're gonna take a look this in action. So follow me along. Come with me. Okay, and here we're going to now transform this into a Typescript. So we'll say, hey, what is animal? Well, animal is, again, anytime you're starting to make this migration, you have to go step by step. Remember, the process will be painful as you begin with your application, okay? Remember, 10 to 60% it will be misery. Get used to that, okay? But once you reach to 80, things start to be way much more easy to do that. Okay. Remember that the value proposition of Typescript is that it allows you to this live coding documentation about the intent you have when you wrote this code. Yep. So animal here, Ba-ba-ba-ba. So it is in fact, yep. I don't think it actually import that. Could you please import that animal from the API response side, please? That's right. Good. Here it say, hey, what is this? The overload match is called. The last overload gave this error. Type breed is not assignable to breed. Okay. So pretty much like we are. I think this is something important to read about because no overload match this call. The last overload gave the following error. Type breed is not assignable to type breed. Is this singular? How can we make sure that this is singular? Because after all this is breed. Well, in our case, it is breeds, my friend. Yep, it's breeds. You know, this is the part when you say, hey, is this TypeScript being finicky with me? Or this is actually a TypeScript error? You know, it say, hey, this is the overload, and it say, oh, okay. So here is when you have to define is the shape of this thing. So we can say as, okay. The overload match this call. The last overload gave the following error. Breeds is not assignable to type breed. And then you got is this. Unsafe returns of any type value. Property breeds does not exist on a type object here. Okay, because it is optional. Okay, because it is optional. But again, this is a custom hook. This is a custom hooks. Okay. The thing here is that unsafe return of any array type, because unfortunately you are assuming that this is as it is.
A little bit of stuff to type here. So use breed list, export default function, use breed list. Animal here is going to be an animal. You can pull that in there. Use query here with breeds, animal fetch list.
But they are inheriting that.
That's all fine. That looks like it works just great.
In this case, is this query string. You got it. So the initial data, exactly, and the query key. And the query key. Which to me is quite interesting because it's like, it is breeds in plural, not as you might think it is. That's interesting. So use breathe list. What are we using is this component on search pattern here. Please open this. Breathe. Yeah, we let it on it there to the form, but we are right now here on the breathes. Type breathe is not assignable to type breathe. The last overload is declared here. So perhaps it's because you don't like. That's to me is why I fucked up, bro. On use query. It's like it is enforcing this to be breathe. It's like it is enforcing this to be breathe in singular. Breathe an animal. That's interesting. You know, it's because it's being finicky about this. So if I say this, okay, and then now I look at this, the result. The result is that this is a breathe list API response or unknown.
That this array that we're returning is everything in here can either be
Exactly. The thing here is that anything here can be either is or a result or a breed, okay, an empty array or a status here. And because we don't want to be this, we need to be specific about what is the shape that we want to always return. And that is doing this type of notation by saying, hey, this, my friend, will be is this. Is you will always return is an string, an array string, okay, followed by the query result. Query result. Query result.
If it kind of
Use query result. Okay. It'll be a use query result interface. With use query result, do you expect something here? Exactly. This is when things getting finicky. Chill, bro. Because it's a conversion of Typescript error. Okay, because we either receive the result. Okay. We either receive the string as it is. Okay. Or the use query result. Yeah, the use query result. Or the use query result.
Tuple type status. And now you can see here, we've refined that it always returns this particular shape.
Oh, query status is okay. It's like query status. Makes sense. Use query results. Query status. How do you reach to that is then when the issue comes here. How do you reach that is when the issue comes here.
Of a return type.
Hmm.
So, does that make sense? Otherwise, anytime that you use this result here, you have to check, is this a string list or is it a status? Is it, same thing here for the query status. But by doing it this way, we've said, this is definitely this is definitely this, always assume it's going to be this way. Okay. Use context, use state, use effect.
And now we're going to take a look at the...
Okay, we have this. I mean, we can identify this as, it's an animal array, right? Which is kind of fun.
Okay. And now we're going to take a look now at this. So we can identify this animal as here, or say animal array here, which is actually, is not complaining about it. Okay, we got is this enum type or bag of constant. So far so good.
So animal, it's response types, it's an array. And now what's cool about this is anything that we know that we pull out of here, it's definitely going to be a valid animal.
So here, now migrating the form. When we do this, so now everything that we pull from here, yeah. So now everything that we pull from here, we can now, for sure, that'll be an animal or a type of those animals. Define them.
And again, I can't put horse in here now because it'll be like, nah, it's not a valid animal, right? TypeScript knows. It knows it's animals. It paid attention when you were showing it videos.
It'll be a valid, exactly, a valid animal. TypeScript knows it. It pays attention. When you show them videos.
Search params, that's fine. useState here. This one here, right now it thinks it's just a string. We actually want to identify that this empty string is an animal.
That's interesting.
And now it knows that it's definitely going to be an animal, which is useful.
That's interesting. This is how you can define is types inside of a state. When you say, hey, this will be as animal, okay? And as you can see, it say, hey, this animal can be one of these state or one of these animals, which is useful. Again, we're using animal here is as a way to only show fixed results to the users. Remember, this is a paired up app.
Okay, request params here. That's interesting. We can get to that here in just a second. Pets is going to be returned as pets any. Well, that's not what we want. We assume that we want this to be a search. Okay, results. That's fine. So what are you mad about here in search? We've identified that this is going to be a pet API response and a location, animal and breed. So that's a query function. Okay. Going back to search params here, we have fetch search. It knows that that's going to be search. So what do we have here in use query that it's mad about that? All right, well, let's keep going.
Let's keep going.
Back to this here in just a second. On the form submit, e.target.value, we just need to identify that that's definitely going to be, oh, okay.
Okay, here is when we need is to actually is fetch this, when we're working with DOM elements here.
Yeah, no, this is fine. Instead of having e.target, put e.currentTarget. I know this is a little strange, but we're not actually guaranteed on these React form events that target's going to be defined despite the fact that it like always is. But current target is guaranteed based on like the spec. You'll find again with TypeScript you end up doing things like this. You'll learn the spec very well because you're gonna have to have guarantees for all of your code.
Mm-hmm. So for example, if you go to this, it say, hey, but it doesn't tell you which you should. Which it exactly. It's screaming a lot of these things. It say, hey, argument of event target is not assignable to the parameter of HTML form element. So you are assuming this is an event target, but in fact it's an HTML form element. And the event target is missing the following property from type HTML. Accept charge, autocomplete, blah, blah, blah. So because this is something that is from here, from the React form, okay? So especially when you're dealing, when you're handling is, especially when you're handling is with that, that makes a lot of sense. Here you can say, hey, animal form dot get animal, it'll be as animal here, and then now he say, hey, anything that is animal, it has to be is a type of animal here. I'm not sure why it doesn't do that. Oh, because I need to put it is here. Okay.
So target in this and current target in this particular sense are always going to be the same thing. A form data entry value, which is not technically a string, which is annoying. So we can do this like conditional question mark dot to string. And now we can be guaranteed that animal is going to be a string. So just put that on all three of these. Why was it working before? Because implicitly it would call it to string for us. And so now when we call set request object, it's getting back string, 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 which is exactly what it wanted.
As you can see here now, we're actually calling this a string, which is a primitive. And we're going to do this here because this is form data
on,
entry
again,
value.
Here, I think this needs to be target.value as animal. As animal.
The thing here and for the thing here. And here is when you say as animal
and
here.
then pets down here. It's still mad about this, which
it can be a type of animal here, like so.
So string, animal, string. Oh, I think this you have to say this is as animal. There we go. Okay. Took me a second. So this is what went wrong in my notes. I made the fun audible to call that fetch search here. This is an animal. In my notes, I just had this as a string, right? Technically, it's an animal. You should type it as such here. Going back to search params, though, is like.
Mm-hmm. But it's here because it's not complaining about it. Unless on my unless of my use breed list, I didn't set that as it is. No. Because in my case, I'm not receiving is that kind of error here. When it tells, hey, this is a pets. Okay. That will come from these results, pet API response, or it can be unknown. Or from the request pattern here. But on fetch search, we're passing that like So what we're going to make this, we will say this is an animal. Okay. Of course, Typescript is now complaining about this particular thing because it's not like that, and then we need to say, hey, this is an animal. Again, this is when Typescript get very finicky about it.
Hey, you're giving me here a string. That is not an animal, right? So here you have to identify that this empty string is an animal, and therefore it'll be happy about that. And same thing here. If you're going to do that, you have to say this is as animal, as well as this is as animal. Okay. So if you're following along and you want to have that typed as an animal, I probably would because it's supposed to be one. You just have to make sure that you're casting it on all the correct places to be an animal type. So I mean, that's probably useful for you to see how I would debug that, right? The way before, if I don't know, we look at this, it was saying that this is improperly being overloaded. And so I was looking through it here, it's like, okay, this type here is not castable to this. And I saw that animal here was being typed as animal, and that's when like my light bulb went off of like, oh, okay. We have to cast this as an animal.
Which is interesting is that as you move on along the code, there it will tell you what to do, for example, here. Because we need to cast it as an expected object here, which is an animal, breed, string, and location. So otherwise, if you don't put things like this, it'll complain about it because it's like, hey, this shape that we're expecting is not a valid one, you know. And then you know, so the cast is not a valid one. Location, string, animal, that kind of thing. So you are sending this, but we are expecting is this. And look at this, how Typescript tells you this type of errors. It's like argument of type, blah 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 blah. This is what you're sending. It's not assignable to parameter of with this shape, right? And again, this is the dance that you have with Typescript here. Hey, I expect this shape, but you give me this. What's going on? Type, animal string, breed string, location string. which is something that I'm passing to, is not assignable to this that is expecting to. Okay, remember that after all here, with Typescript is that it's giving you this live documentation, this live coding documentation about the intent that someone or you had when you wrote this code. And in this case, the set request parent, which is an object that we are passing as a way to let React please update the state and re-render the component. So in other words, we have to say, hey, this as annual. Yep. Okay. And here is the same for this. It tells you, hey, this is not assignable to. Argument of type string is not assignable to a parameter of any of this type. Okay. So because here is current target dot value. Okay, so we expect this to be as animal, and now it's not complaining about it. The same for this, as animal. So because we are in fact actually passing is each one of those select as an animal per se. So then we got something here. File is not declared as a result. Oh, because then we need to change the result exactly, and now go through the rendering list here by saying, hey, you know what, now let me take a look at this. This pets must be now is array of pets. I think it's pet here for that. This interface that come from here, which must be a pet, but it's an array of pets. Then we're going to okay. But because a lot of people can be confused about pets, you can say, hey, this will be is pet as pet type. You know, pet type. And what you to use is pet type. From here, it saves this as pet type. I mean, it's inside of the curly bracket here. When you define this kind of thing, you say, hey, it's this one. Pet type is undeclared, but it's never read. Exactly. And then you got it. So here, the shape of this pet is like, well, this is an object. It's an object called pets that will contain is an array of pets. Exactly. An array of pets. And that's how you fix this particular error. So no more error here. That's good. And yeah, pretty much is that.
Any of these, right? We're not adding new species of pets every day. I'm not. Maybe you are. But yeah, you kind of have to because we don't have to have this animal type. We could totally just say this is string type and move on. But this is such a limited set that it made sense to me. So that's kind of up to you. I would not do breed. I think that would be a bad idea, but it might be typing animal might not be worth it. I guess is probably what I would say, because you end up with doing stuff like this. Okay, questions? Results is the only thing here. Yeah, so I think we still have to go type results, but otherwise we're pretty close there. Results. Results.tsx from /API response. Yep. Okay, and let's go do app.jsx. So make that app.tsx. Use state here. We have to say that this is either going to be null as pet or null. We need to import that pet type as well, because otherwise it assumes that this use state is always going to be a null, right? So we have to say that this could be a null or it could be a.
As you can see here, look at the signature exactly, which is pet null react.dispatch. This is quite interesting, because the first argument, it can be the state, and the other is something called that React is the that they say is Jesus. That React say that this is the dispatcher here. Okay. Interesting. React does set state actions. Exact, which is where now reacts on this. So when you're using hooks, the first parameter is the value, this getter, and the second is the setter. So because of that, now they call the setter as dispatch. Hey, let React to actually update the value of this and re-render that component when that state was defined.
Pet. That's fine. And here, just before this, we just have to say if there's no container, then crash the whole app because we give up. Throw, new error, no container to render to. Which it would do that anyway, but we're just going to be really extra explicit about it.
Okay. Because this is how do you define the signature inside of the context.
Adopted pet or null dispatch is not assignable to pet. Okay, well that's fine. So we do have to go back, it looks like, to
our adopted context.
Our adopted pet here, and we have to say that this can be a pet or it can be null.
Exactly.
Okay, and that'll fix the happiness here. Because in theory, it will be null most of the time, right? If someone hasn't clicked like adopt a pet yet, that's going to be null, so that's actually a valid thing for it to complain about. Okay. We still have this details one to suss out of what is upset about.
Okay. So in the meantime, let me actually is now, after I look at the result, and then look at the app.jsx here, what it say? Everything works as expected. Oh, and here is where we need to define on our state is like, hey, this will be as pet or null, right? Pet is not defined. I would like you to please import that. Can you import that for me? We need to transform this as this one. And now he say, okay, so fetch pet, be my guess. Okay, here's not complaining because now we actually identify on the context. This is the shape of this. And here we need to be, and thanks for that, because we need to be more explicit about it. It's telling us, hey, the type of this can be what, an element or a null. What do you want to do? Well, we need to be a little bit more explicit about that. If container does not exist, then throw an error, right? And throw new error. Element does not exist.
Null most of the time. Okay. That's about it.
Okay, so no container to render. And that's something interesting. And yeah, I don't have any more complaints about it. And we migrate our small app to Typescript, which is awesome. Holy fuck.
Go back, it looks like it can be a pet or a... Okay. In details. I had this pet API response.
Okay. In his case, it's on detail. It's interesting that it doesn't tell me that we have something there. So we got the patch here. The last overload gave the following error of detailed string is not an assignment to parameter of type query function pet API here. You say, hey, the argument that you're passing here is not assignable to this query function. The type query key is read only and cannot be assigned to a mutable type detail string. Let me see what is. Okay. Unsave any value for this, which can be any value or null. And all of these are error from the pet for that. Okay, that'll make sense. So it's because here on the fetch function here, I'm defining is that this must be a detail or a string exactly. So it's because I'm forcing is that to be that. The thing was that I was forcing that to be like so.
It actually delete this.
Exactly.
And that is correct.
Because I was forcing that to be something that is not this proper signature. Then we have something called here image. I say when they say, hey, do you remember this carousel thing? It's not what it's supposed to. It's like you are passing something called image. Okay. You say type string. It's not assignable to type here. Okay, we are passing is this empty here, and you are accepting is an image. String of image. Okay, and that'll be good. Exactly. Now you expect that as it is. Okay, because it's not an empty string, it's in fact it's a string of image here.
Looks like there's a warning in here, which we don't need this pet API response anymore. Okay, there we go. We are now up to TypeScript-4. And as you can see now, we have an entirely typed project. There are no any's in this anymore. If we run npm run lint again, we shouldn't have any errors here. We don't. We can do npx tsc -- no.
Exactly. So now we want to make sure if I didn't lose my mind here. Say npm run lint here. There's no error here. It say, hey, oops, when something went wrong. No file matching pattern here. Maybe not in the proper folder. So if I take a look at the package JSON here and say, hey, package JSON here, and then I do things like this, please maybe my guess. Exactly. The same for lint. Okay. And there you got it. So no error here. Okay. So I successfully convert this project into from GSX to React.
No emit
to TSX.
This will run the TypeScript checker. Everything's working like that.
This is now the TypeScript checking. So please npm tsx now emit TypeScript checking. Great. So after you successfully convert a file or a project to TypeScript, check for linting. Check for linting. Okay, and TypeScript check by running is this 2 command, which is also interesting, by the way. By running is these 2 commands, where they are. Format lint. You get format. And you say is npm run lint. Exactly. So npm run lint, which is telling you to the linter. Npm run lint for that. Okay. Anyway, as you wish it, sir. npm run lint, which will have that the linter here. I want you to, if something goes wrong, you're gonna complain about it, which is this. You barely see this. Let me put it, Jesus. Okay. And now you're gonna run is the TypeScript compiler. No emit. Okay. So if both commands run without printing something, we are good to go. We are good to go. Okay.
In your package.json, go ahead and add the.
Oh, I need the, yeah, we need to and add to your package JSON that command exactly as the linter or what?
Type check.
Okay. As type check here. Simple type check. Yep. So type check here. And you say, hey, I want you to now please run this command in the local folder. If you don't have that, go and install that locally here. Typescript compiler, no emit. Okay. So all of these are useful things. Yeah. So all of these are useful things because it can pass. So because we can define them as part of our CI/CD pipelines for code quality. Yep, for code quality.
Here. And you just... So again, one of the reasons I add all of these. So now when I have like my GitHub action that I set up later, I can run type check.
Exactly. Meaning, so once you have your GitHub Actions set up later, so I can run this command to guarantee to get for code quality. For code quality.
I can run lint. You can run format check if you want to. Format, you can put like a format : check, and it's instead of write, you do what is it? mpx prettier -- help. It's like list different or check. Oh, they give you a new one. So then you can just do that -- check instead. So then you can do npm run format : check. So this is like if you have someone that's like working in your project that's not running Prettier and you're getting sick of them committing files to your project that are not run through Prettier, you can have CI basically say like, hey, if you don't conform to Prettier, then I'm going to fail your build, right? And then yeah, you run type check, you run lint, you run format check, and then we're about to do unit tests. Then you run all of your unit tests as well, and you can be pretty assured that all of your code is formatted and to style and working before you send it out to production.
Mm-hmm. Something.
And I'm going to fail your build, right? And then yeah, you run type check, you run lint, you run.
Mm-hmm. So you run type check. Exactly. So we run type check, type lint. We run type check, type lint. Exactly. You run type check, you run lint, you run format check.
Run format check, and then we're about to do unit tests. Then you.
Exactly. So you run type check. So you run type check, lint, code formatting,
build, right? And then yeah, you run type check, you run lint, you run format.
So you write type check, you run lint, you run
check, and then we're about to do. Then I'm going to fail your build, right? And then yeah, you run type check, you run lint, you run.
You run type check, you run lint.
Format check, and then we're about to do.
format check. So we write type check lint format check. So for example, here is this one, format check. You say, hey, I want you to know format check. You say here is check. I want to see if this actually works as expected. Again, prettier dash help. Where in the F is this? Editor options, okay, config option, format option, okay, format option. And check, okay, output, okay, and check. Okay, check if any given files are formatted. Print a human-friendly summarize. So here is this. I want you to pretty check if any of this full file here actually match here. Oops. There you got it. Then we can pass this. Exactly. Checking formatting all matches files use printed code style. Good. So now this is not complaining about it. For example, here. We can also add format check. Okay, so you run type check. Yeah, so you run type check lint format check. So now your code is ready for production. Yep.
Then I'm going to fail your build, right? And then yeah, you run type check, you run lint, you run format check, and then we're about to do unit tests. Then you run all of your unit tests as well, and you can be pretty assured that all of your code is formatted and to style and working before you start production.
Pretty assured?
Pretty assured. It's going to be pretty good.
Prettier, sure.
Yep.
Prettier.
So again, this is just kind of a preview of what TypeScript and React is like. If you want to go get further into depth with it, yeah. So again, this is just kind of a preview of what TypeScript and React is like. If you want to go get further into depth with it, go check out Steve's course. If you want more TypeScript goodness, go check out Mike's course, Mike North.
All right. Good. All right, that was very interesting. Totally, completely. So for that'll be all for this video, because now the next topic is Redux, and Redux will be here waiting for us. I think it says waiting for us. So with that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.